All right, let's sit tall and we'll close the eyes and take a nice breath in and a nice breath out. And with each breath that you take, allow yourself to arrive. Feel that you are grounded, affixed to the solidity of the earth beneath you, but that you're not rigid. In fact, you're flexible, fluid, and open to growth and change, to the unknown, to the space around, within, and throughout, to the exploration of your own humanity, and to the honoring of and respect for your own journey as well as the journey of others. Let each breath bring you deeper into established inner peace. Allow each breath to bring you deeper into self-knowledge. And we'll chant the opening mantra. If you know them, please join. Otherwise, you can simply listen. Breathing in for Om. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Hava Mahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anafshrinvanu Tibisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha. Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajini Vati Dina Mavitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagman Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. Charanam Pavitram Vitatam Puranam Yena Putastarati Dushkritani Yena Putastarati Dushkritani Yena Pavitrena Shudhena Putaha Atipapmana Maratin Tarema Shri Sadguru Charana Ravindabhyan Namaha. Taking a breath in and a breath out. And fluttering the eyes open gently. Obviously, I added a second line into that last mantra by mistake. So you can ignore that. That's perfectly fine. Today, we're going to continue our conversation of the Bhagavad Gita. We've been going chapter by chapter and just kind of highlighting the variety of lessons or important points that are contained within each chapter. And so we are actually up to chapter 6. Last time we did chapter 5. And chapter 6 is kind of an interesting chapter because it kind of moves in another direction now. It's starting to emphasize for Arjuna the solution. Krishna is explaining to Arjuna what it is in his life that he could do in order to alleviate his own suffering, his own ignorance, his own misunderstanding. It's the chapter on meditation. It's the chapter on the discipline necessary in order to be able to sit quietly and not be disturbed by the thoughts of the mind. And so just kind of as a reminder, the Bhagavad Gita is a conversation. It's 18 chapters. It's a conversation between Krishna as the Godhead and Arjuna as a warrior, a world-renowned warrior who's having a dilemma. He's having a crisis, and he is supposed to be going in to fight this war, and he doesn't want to. And Krishna is explaining to him all the reasons that support him fighting the war. And Arjuna is just continually saying, no, 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 no. trying to not embrace the responsibility that he has to uphold ethic and virtue and righteousness, and to set things to some degree right in the world. And so they're having this ongoing conversation. And in this chapter, I kind of feel like it's the first chapter. Prior to this, Krishna is explaining a lot to Arjuna about the truth and about our perception of the truth and about disturbances in the mind, and alleviating the weight or the burden of being attached to the fruits of our actions. And now in this chapter, he's saying, sit down and meditate. Sit down and meditate. And he tells him how to. So he tells him how to solve his own problem. And really, in some instances in life, it really is this easy. It's as easy as taking the time to be mindful. Now, it's easy, but it's also the most difficult, challenging thing that you will ever do, because the moment that we sit down to take account of our own accountability, then suddenly we realize that there's a second part to that, and that is accepting accountability, accepting it, and acting in accordance, in alignment with our own dharma, with ethic, with our own inner goodness. And that can be very, very hard and very difficult. Sometimes it puts us into very uncomfortable situations. And they're not uncomfortable because they're wrong. They're uncomfortable because we've just kind of gone with the flow of society, gone with the flow of fear, gone with the flow of anger, gone with the flow of excuses, gone with some other flow, with the flow of ignorance. We've gone with that flow for so long that to shift and to go against those currents is hard, uncomfortable, scary, and difficult. Very, very difficult. I remember when my husband and I first got together, we first started dating, he invited me to go on a camping trip with him and his cousin, and then his cousin's friends. And so we went down to the Delaware Water Gap, and we were going on a canoe trip down the river. Now, my husband and his nephew, they were pretty close in age, they're partying age, right? So we were all very young then. I was like 27 years old, 26 years old, something like that. And so we had some beer with us, and we're in the canoes, and I think we had 3 or 4 canoes, and we're going downstream, right? Because isn't that the way that you typically go when you're canoeing, is you go with the stream? Well, the guys decided that they didn't have enough beer. And so they hopped into one boat and decided they were going to go back upstream. They were going to go against the rapids, against the flow of water. And it was the most hysterical thing to see, because it was hard. It was like, seriously, we were waiting for them all to die. It was that hysterical, but, for the boat to capsize and whatnot. So, but this is what it's like when we try to kind of shift the way we walk in life. We've been going with the flow for so long. We've been going with the flow that to now turn around, there's quite a few adjustments that we have to make, quite a few acknowledgments that we have to make internally, and quite a bit of courage that we have to cultivate in order to meet that discomfort and that difficulty. So this chapter 6, it talks about a concept called Niskama Karma Yoga. Niskama Karma Yoga. And basically, karma means action. Niskama means not attached. So it's unattached action, unattached to the fruits of your labors. Niskama karma is when we are taking action without attachment or expectation of what the outcome should be. Because every action, instead of it being a way of feeding our ego, instead of it being a way of proving our worthiness or disproving it, instead of it being something, that feeds the ego, every action becomes a devotion. Every action becomes an offering. So in this regard, if every action is an offering, then the outcome is not important. It's the action that is to be based in kindness, based in compassion, based in devotion, based in awareness, based in humility and a sense of connection. The action. And then whatever the action brings about is not under our control anyway. And when we live our life in this regard, when we live our life in a way where every action we take, we see as a service to divinity, God, goddess, whatever you wish to call that, every action we take is something that we're placing on the altar, the altar that we carry in our heart, then it is far more likely that our actions are going to start taking on different qualities than what they typically do. They will be more patient and kind. They will be more courteous. They will be a bit softer. Because if you were coming up to, say, Saraswati altar right there to your left, that beautiful altar, I know Saraswati is not there yet, but she will be soon. If you were bringing an apple to place on the altar, would you throw the apple at the altar? Yes or no? No. You would place it on the altar, correct? So if you look at your life as the altar and your actions as the offering, would you throw your actions onto the altar? Or would you mindfully place them? You would mindfully place them. And as a result of that, your actions take on a different quality. They have to. So very important to know that this is what, Krishna is telling Arjuna. He's saying, the problem is that you're so attached. You're so attached to the outcome. You're so attached to what could happen, what might happen, what you think is likely to happen, that you're missing the whole point of this. That this whole exercise, every breath you take, every action you take, if you just look at it as an exercise in the sacred, you will know what to do. And you will do it in a way that doesn't embellish your suffering or anyone else's, at least not on purpose. So alleviate yourself of that attachment to the outcome and come into a place of niskama karma yoga. He goes on to explain to Arjuna that there's a path in order for us to be able to do this. And that path is called Ashtanga yoga. Now, some of you in the room may have practiced a variety of different types of yoga and have no doubt heard of Ashtanga yoga, the type of westernized yoga that was founded by Patabi Joyce, Sri Patabi Joyce, and is very popular in the West. That's not what I'm talking about. The word is the same, Ashtanga and yoga, but the translation, the meaning of it is a little bit different. Patanjali's Ashtanga yoga, Ashtanga, 8-limbed path of yoga. Patanjali says there are 8 things that a human being must do, or places within their life that they must work, things in their life they must work at, in order to be able to come close or into this experience of nishkama karma yoga. And those include the yama, the niyama, so the 10 virtues. So the yama, nonviolence, truthfulness, non-attachment, economy of energy, and discipline, contentment, cleanliness, self-study, God consciousness or devotion. So these 10 must be practiced. Yama, niyama, pranayama. Pranayama, the third one, pranayama is the breathing. Asana, the physical posturing. Although Patanjali doesn't necessarily mean downward dog, he means practicing the asana of sitting still in meditation. Pratyahara, stillness or non-attachment. Practicing being non-attached, practicing. Close your eyes, come into stillness, and don't be attached to your thoughts. Don't try to stop them. Don't try to speed them up. Don't try to change them. Don't be attached to them. Just like you can't be attached to a cloud in the sky, don't attach yourself to your thoughts. Practice pratyahara. It's also called sense withdrawal. This is very difficult. That's why it comes later. Dhyana or dharana, which is a concentration. Practice concentration. Practice not being distracted. What's the opposite of concentration? Distraction. Try not to be so distracted. Don't look at the next shiny thing in every possible direction. Keep yourself focused. Focused on what? Focused on your sadhana. Focused on your spirituality, your devotion. Focused on self-improvement. Not improvement because, you're a bad person or you always do things wrong or any of these hyper criticisms that are so prevalent in the world today, but self-improvement by way of self-wisdom. So many people in the world right now exist in a place of self-ignorance. They don't know how amazing they are. They don't know the goodness that they carry. They don't know the potential that they hold in their heart. They don't believe it. They think, well, maybe there's a little bit of something there, but this world is not going to allow me. So we need to wipe that type of thinking out and come into a place of greater self-awareness. That's self-improvement. Once an individual becomes more and more profoundly aware of the goodness that they carry in their own heart, they're more likely to use that goodness. They're more likely to rely on it. They're more likely to share it. The more a person feels that they're angry, the more a person feels that they're violent, the more a person feels that that's what they're filled up with, then that's what they're going to rely on. They're going to rely on their anger to get them through. They're going to rely on violence to get them through. But the thing is, if they really want to have change in their life, positive, lasting change, then they need to move away from the violent tendencies and move toward the tendencies of goodness, toward the understanding that there's this massive potential within each one of us. So let me spend more time investigating what's in here and less time investigating what's going on out there. Let me back away from the gossip. Let me back away from sticking my nose in everybody else's business. Let me back away from judgmentalism. Let me back away from the hyper dramatic stories. Let me back away from trying to create a story about myself that bolsters me up or puts me down. Let me back away from those things. And instead of being distracted by all those shiny objects, let me turn my awareness inward and investigate this goodness. It's like you get an Easter basket. Easter's coming up, right? So I was walking through the store the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, they flipped over to Easter overnight almost. And it's like everything is Easter, chocolate everywhere. You get an Easter basket and there's one thing you're looking forward to. There's one thing that you believe is in that Easter basket and you go directly to it. Maybe it's the peanut butter cups. Maybe it's the red jelly beans. I don't know, whatever it is for you, but you go for that and you ignore the rest for the most part. So you don't know what you're missing. You don't know what you're ignoring unless you stop and take accountability and start to explore what else is in the basket. I don't have to just dive into my anger. I don't have to dive into my insecurity. I don't have to dive in to those things. I can back up a little bit and see what else is in the basket. Goodness is one of the things that's in the basket. And it's actually, it's the colorful fluff that everything else is set into, you know? So let me investigate that for a while. Let me investigate that foundation that makes everything so attractive and beautiful, or at least most things so attractive and beautiful. So we have yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, which is meditation, and then samadhi, which is perfection, but not the kind of perfection that we tend to think about in the West. Perfection is knowledge of the self and union, with divinity, true union, where there is no doubt, there's no further need to question. There's no suffering on account of perceived separation. We walk each step, and we breathe each breath, and we take each action that we take as an offering. So he says there's 2 levels of this Ashtanga. The first level is the beginner level, and the second level is a more masterful level, advanced, if you want to use that word. The beginner level is probably the hardest level. I don't know, to even be moved, to move from a place of accepting excuses, not knowing oneself, relying on one's anger or insecurity or story, to inner inquiry. The amount, courage, dedication, curiosity, sincerity that it takes just to be moved in that direction, just to turn and say, I'm not going to look at the fire. I'm going to look over here. I'm not going to go directly for the peanut butter cup. I'm going to check out something else. That shift requires some huge, amazing energetic shift within you. And it's completely uncomfortable. It's like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. It's like that first stage when the caterpillar, you can only imagine, right? I mean, it melts down almost. It becomes a gunk of jello, and then it re-solidifies into this beautiful, amazing, butterfly. But it's the moment when there's this impulse. Maybe it's a cramp. I don't know. Maybe it's, spasms. It's something uncomfortable, but it happens. And then the caterpillar knows change is on the way. Big change is on the way. So that's a huge shift, and it's an uncomfortable shift. Uncomfortable. So that beginner level, very difficult because it's unknown territory. It's uneven ground. Michelle and I were out for a walk today down in Kong. And Casey, we went back on those paths that go back into the forest along the river. And we decided that we were going to go down a hill. And it was quite muddy. And, it could have been treacherous, we're not spring chickens anymore. We admit it. But that's what it's like. It's like, where's my footing? How do I do this without slipping up? How do I make it from here to there safely, intact, in one piece? How do I keep a good sense of humor about this, And that's what it is to be a beginner, is to discover new territory. And so there's a need for curiosity, for courage, for the cultivation of strength, for inquiry, asking the question of, what exactly is it that I'm investigating here? Who can guide me? Who can answer questions that I might have? And so seeking out a teacher is really super important. For an individual who is at the kind of the next stage, we could call it advanced, but it's also difficult, or masterful, we could call it that too. That individual has a better idea of the terrain. They have on the proper hiking boots. Maybe they have a walking stick, maybe they have a rain jacket. They have some tools that they need in order to go up and down those hills safely, or at least a little bit more safely than what the beginner does, because they've been experiencing it for a little while. I'll give you another example. The first time you try to bake bread and you don't know how to use yeast in order to make the bread rise, that's a whole learning experience that can be exquisitely painful as the bread doesn't rise. You have to learn about how to place the bread. How to place the yeast, and especially if you're using one of those automatic bread makers. I remember when Ed and I had first gotten one of those, you had to put the little packet of yeast, empty it into the one corner, put the flour for the bread in the other corner, and somehow get the water in there too, and not let the two meet, let the machine do that work for you. And I didn't know what I was doing. He didn't know what he was doing. We were just following the instructions that we were given, trying to figure it out. But then by the time we made like the 10th loaf, we knew what we were doing. We had a much better idea. And sometimes the bread came out flat, and sometimes it didn't come out very well at all. And sometimes it came out amazing. But we were less surprised, less disrupted, less distracted, because we knew that it was just part of the process. So that's an exquisite difference between the beginner and the one who is beyond being just, simply the beginner, the one who has a little bit more experience. One does not know what to expect, and there may be much more fear there. The other one has a pretty good idea that there's going to be some things going on, but they have some tools to help them along the way. So the two levels of Ashtanga yoga, this applies to the virtues, the practice of nonviolence, the practice of truthfulness, the practice of non-stealing, the practice of economy of energy, the practice of non-grasping, the practice of cleanliness and contentment, the practice of discipline, the practice of self-study, and the practice of devotion. These two levels are applicable to all 10 of those. They're also applicable to the practice of asana, to the practice of pranayama, breathing techniques, to the practice of pratyahara, detachment. The beginner will have a tendency to look at detachment and think, get it away from me. Let me push it away. Let me put it under the rug. Let me ignore it. Let me hide it. Let me deny it. And the one who has a little bit more experience says that's not going to work. It's going to come back threefold, fivefold, 100-fold. You have to look at it, be present to it, work through it. So there's a little bit of a different level of understanding between the beginner and the one who has a bit more experience for the Ashtanga, for the eightfold path of yoga. Krishna then goes into talking about mind control and detachment. And he says, look, it's an issue with your mind. Attachment is the mind. That's exactly what it is. You're let's just say attached to French toast. Have to have French toast. Sunday morning can't be good without French toast. That's your mind. Sunday morning can be great, no matter what you have. A bowl of cereal, oatmeal, a walk in the woods. Sunday morning and the goodness of Sunday morning is not dependent upon you having French toast, but we talk ourselves into believing things like that. We let our mind be out of control. We let it run rampant with these stories and beliefs. So we need to rein that in. And when we notice that we are attached to something, when we are especially hyper attached to something, then we need to do the work of detaching from it. Whether that is something material or a mental story or an emotional feeling, we need to look at that honestly and truthfully and investigate it, take it apart a little bit, face it, and then, if possible, and with healthy tools, start to change it. So mind control, being able to control the mind, actually fosters a greater natural detachment. Because if you stop to think for a moment why you feel attached to the things you are attached to, your answer for most of them would probably be fear or longing, desire for enjoyment. Okay, I'm attached to things out of fear. Well, let's do that one second. I'm attached to things out of desire, a longing for enjoyment. Well, there's that Easter basket example again. I'm attached to that peanut butter cup because I don't think anything else is going to bring me enjoyment. But the moment that I let go of that way of thinking, then suddenly everything in the Easter basket has the potential to bring me enjoyment. All of it. Even just looking at the Easter basket and never even taking a piece out of it suddenly carries with it the potential for enjoyment. But the moment my mind wanders and goes off into thinking, oh, I've got to have that peanut butter cup. Good Lord, Easter isn't going to be the same without it. Then suddenly I've said, I will not, I've made a decision, a subconscious decision, but a decision nonetheless. I will not be happy without the peanut butter cup. So working with mind control is to expand the mind, to find, to discover, and to experience a greater inclusive happiness rather than such a highly conditional happiness, and a conditional happiness that is based on the desires of the mind rather than access to the things that are actually right in front of you. Now, the other one, fear, is very interesting because they can both be tricky, but fear can definitely be a little tricky. When we look at the things that we're attached to and we realize that we're attached to them based on fear, then that means that we need to look at the fear and sit with it for a little while and hold a space for it and reassure it and do what needs to be done in order to reassure ourselves that there really is abundance in this world and in this universe, and that just because things don't always go the way that I want them to, it doesn't mean that those things are wrong. Maybe I'm supposed to walk a different path at this point. Maybe I'm supposed to look away from the fire and, toward the picture on the wall. Maybe I'm just supposed to be doing something differently. And so life is aligning me to that. If I can let go of my fear, I might find that there's actually enjoyment in realigning myself to my dharma versus my desire, versus my attachment. Fear is also almost always associated with a fear of death, with a fear, and not just the big D, not just the big death, death of the body, but the death of the relationship, death of the moment, the end of anything. Fear is oftentimes related to the end of things. If we can sit with the truth that endings must happen, they have to, in order for beginnings to occur. And if we can find in that understanding some reassurance of the continuity of experience, it's like digging through the Easter basket and finding new little things in there that we never even expected. Then maybe that will deepen our faith in the abundance that keeps producing itself and offering itself to us. And we'll see, I don't really need to be afraid. I'm living this life anyway. And right now, I'm just having this particular experience of it. Next week, I'll have a different experience of it. Somebody asked me after I broke my knee, they said, aren't you scared? Like at my age, I'm not that old, I'm 59, but a broken limb can mean a lot. It can mean, reduced mobility. It can lead to early onset arthritis and other things. And they were like, aren't you afraid? And I said, no, not really, because it's just really another way of experiencing life. So it gives me greater insight into the diversity that exists. I remember my daughter, she said something so very wise to me one day. I was having a moment of self-pity in my practice, and I went to her in her office and I said, oh, goodness, Casey, I go to child's pose and there's no way, like I am not sitting onto my heels. And she was like, show me. And so I went, down onto the floor and I was going back as if I was going to sit back into wide-kneed child's pose. And yeah, there was like this much space between my butt and my heels. And normally that's a posture that I would just sink right into, not an issue at all. And she looked at me and I think she was a little irritated because she said, Mom, do you realize that's most people's normal. And I looked at her and I said, okay, all right, realign. And what am I learning in this moment? What am I seeing? How am I experiencing this? What is it helping me to understand? Overcome the fear of thinking you'll never be the same, and understand you're never the same anyway. And instead of focusing on that, focus on, you know what? Oh my gosh, I'm always changing. I'm always growing. I'm always learning. I'm always doing something new and different in some aspect of life. I am not a stagnant being, and I am not meant to be one. I'm meant to constantly grow and learn and change and expand. So these two bases for attachment, whether it be fear or desire, to gather mind control, to gain mind control is to look at them sincerely and to shift them so that we are more empowered to realign ourselves, aligning with Dharma, aligning with the experience of this life. We're here, we're living it. Life is not bad. Life is not a curse. Life is not just suffering. We make it mostly suffering because of the decisions that we make to be more focused. To be less focused, to be more distracted, and to see more value. I'm not sure why we tend to do this, but we do. We have a tendency to actually see, in a strange way, more value in our suffering than we do in our happiness. Let something good happen to you today and see how many times you repeat it. Maybe you walk outside to your car and there's a flower blooming and you get a little smell of the beautiful smell of the flower, and it fills your heart with some kind of relief and peace, right? Then get in your car, start to drive home. And at that corner of Antietam, somebody pulls out and cuts you off. Which story are you going to continually repeat? It won't be the flower. It will be the drama of the driver cutting you off. That's the human tendency. And we have to ask ourselves, why is it my tendency to latch on to that which causes me suffering? Why is it my tendency to let go more easily that which brings me relief? And why do I often mistake them for one another? Krishna goes on to tell Arjuna about preparation and the method of preparation. And he gives him very specific instructions. He says, first of all, the yogi meditates. So you must meditate. The way that you meditate is that, and I'm going to read this specifically from the Bhagavad Gita, to practice yoga, in other words, to meditate, and meditation for the purpose of union of yourself with divinity, one should go to a secluded place, should lay down kusa grass on the ground, and then cover it with some type of soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low, and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling the mind, the senses, and activities, and fixing the mind on one point. And let that one point be Krishna, or Christ, or Durga, or whatever aspect of divinity it is that you are attracted to. That is the one point of fixation. Let this meditation be my offering to that. Let this breath be my offering. Let this intention, even though it's difficult, and I'm sitting here going, oh my God, my knees hurt. Oh, my back is killing me. Oh, how much longer do I got to sit here? Let all of that, let all of it be the offering. Because in the end, I'm sitting here, no matter how difficult or easy. So wrap it all up with a bow, put it on the altar, and give it up. Give it up. He goes on to say, the process of meditation, one should hold one's body, neck, and in a straight line, stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Some people say with the eyes open, and some have said with the eyes closed. With the eyes closed, you can stare at the tip of the nose with a gentler attitude. With the eyes open, you stare at the tip of the nose. There tends to be a lot more muscular constraint. So my suggestion is with the eyes closed and making sure that it's not a harsh crossing. It's a slight crossing, just gazing slightly toward the tip of the nose without dropping the head. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from desire, one should meditate upon divinity. So there's the fear and the desire. You won't be able to sustain awareness, focus, one-pointedness on divinity for very long at all if the mind is constantly going to, where's that peanut butter cup? Where's that satisfaction? Where's that pleasure? Where's that anger? Where's that fear? We have to put those things away in order to find peace, in order to know peace, and in order to experience connection, union. It's like an artist. An artist has, little tubes of paint. They have black, green, blue. Somewhere they have red, brown, yellow. And the black, the green, the blue, the brown, very good for them painting a log cabin, stones. But then they say, I want to paint an apple. Well, to paint an apple, they need the red paint. They have to put away the paints that aren't needed. And they have to pull out the red paint. It's similar here. You need to put away the distractions that are not conducive to the experience of meditation, to the experience of peace, to the experience of happiness, to the experience, and I don't mean egotistical happiness, I mean contentment. Put those things away and draw only upon the tools that are meant to support and inform you. He says the key for success in the yoga process is regulation. And this takes us back to the niyama, particularly the third niyama, tapas. Tapas is discipline or discernment. And in the West, sometimes I think students don't care very much for this word. It's funny, I read a post, and the individual is a yoga teacher, and she posted something along the lines of how I miss the days when I had students who didn't mind being corrected. And you have to teach the student what to expect if you want them to be okay with it. You can't just come forward and start correcting people and not explaining to them that you're not telling them they're wrong. You're just suggesting that there might be a different way to do it. And that in this other way of doing it, maybe it will bring about a more profound peace, a greater sense of establishment, a greater sense of presence. And if that other way wasn't working for them, then maybe it's time to try something newer. So, but in order to accept redirection, there has to be a cultivated discipline, a cultivated discernment. No, the teacher is not insulting me. The teacher is not telling me another thing I'm doing wrong. The teacher is actually guiding me. The teacher is informing me. The teacher is teaching me. One time, Swamiji was here, and we were doing a program at Community Medical Center in Toms River. And typically when he would teach the yoga and the meditation, I would be the person modeling for him. And this one day he was in a bit of a mood. And so he had this book that he wrote that had all of these different postures in it and his explanation of the postures. And I don't know, he was just being playful. And he opens the book and he's like, can you do this one? And of course, it's got to be like the hardest ones. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. And he said, oh, you could do it. Do it. Go ahead. You know? And he was right. I could, at least in that moment, while I'm sitting there with my guru, you know, I was able to get in and out of the posture. But his corrections to support me in getting it out of the posture were very direct, were very concise, were very sharp, were not apologetic, were not coddling, were not egging me on. They were, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. That is not supporting you. They were very specific. One of the students in, you know, the group that was there came up to me after and said, I'm so sorry he talked to you that way. And I said, talk to me what way? And she said, well, you know, harshly like that. And I said, oh, he was not speaking to me harshly. He was teaching me in a no nonsense manner because he cares that deeply that my practice should thrive, that he does not wish for me to make mistakes. So he doesn't want me to misunderstand. So there's nothing for you to apologize for. He did not insult me in any way, shape, or form. He taught me. Now, at that point, I had been studying with Swamiji for probably 10 years. So to me, that was a cultivated discipline within myself to understand what he was saying. But to some individuals, to even say hello is to present a dagger to the heart, because no discipline has been cultivated to understand the difference between a hurtful word and a helpful word. So Krishna tells Arjuna, discipline is of the utmost importance. Absolutely. The yogi must be disciplined. And discipline cannot be taught by a teacher. It can only be inspired. It cannot be demanded by anybody. It can be embraced. We really need to turn inward and look at the ways in which we need to grow, expand, change, adapt, adjust, accommodate, modify, and then follow through with doing so in order to bring ourselves to a deeper level of discipline. And discipline is not cold and hard. It's not harsh, you know. Discipline is compassionate. Discipline is understanding. You know, this is tough. This is tough. One more Swamiji story. The first time I went to India and I went to his ashram, it was at Christmas time. I was there for 3 months, and over the Christmas holiday, he gave each one of us, there was a group of us there. He gave each one of us a task to do for this big Christmas celebration that was coming up. And so you can imagine that it was an interesting time because we're at a Hindu temple, a Hindu institute grounds with all established temples, and we're preparing for a Christmas holiday. And Swamiji was like, you know, some people didn't like the idea of that. Some people came to him and said, no, this is a Hindu temple. You should not be celebrating Christmas here. And Swamiji said, we are one. So we celebrate what people celebrate. And if you don't understand that, then you have more studying to do. So he gives us each a task. And the task he gives me is to teach some of the staff at his ashram Christmas carols. And many of them didn't speak English, and or at least not very well. And so it's difficult to teach individuals who don't have a little bit of a grasp on English how to sing Christmas carols in English. It's not easy. And they didn't really want to learn from me anyway, because, you know, I think, you know, that Swamiji told me to was the only saving grace there was eventually. So initially they didn't show up for our meetings, and they talked and talked and talked and weren't listening to me. And I was getting very frustrated. And we had our first live rehearsal in front of Swamiji. And it was, when I tell you horrible, I am not kidding. It was horrible. Everybody was off key. Nobody knew. I mean, it was just bad. So in front of everybody, Swamiji looked at me and he said, I gave you a task. I asked you to do this. Why is it not being done? And I looked at him and I said, well, Swamiji, they don't want to listen to me. And he said, oh, what do you mean they don't want to listen to you? Are you a teacher? And he was very abrupt in that moment. And I stood there and I looked at him and I said, yes, Swamiji. And he said, then go teach. Went back, whole different approach. We'll meet at this time. You'll all be quiet. We'll go through this. This is not for you to satisfy me. This is for your devotion to Swamiji. And because his straightforwardness and his own discipline to say things the way he sees things, not with harm, but with honesty, cultivated within me an inspiration to do the same. And at our next live rehearsal with Swamiji, things were quite a bit different. They were still off key, but everybody was showing up and it was going much better. And then by the time we actually had the event, it was pretty decent. It was pretty decent. Now, there was a moment there where I wasn't accustomed to that necessarily. And I thought to myself, poor me, poor me, this person who I really look up to, maybe he doesn't like me. Maybe he thinks like I'm weak or something. It still inspired me to move forward in a more profound way. But there were moments there where I was second guessing myself, and I was also second guessing him. Later on, maybe about a week or two later, we were having a satsang. Every Thursday we would have satsang, and we would have Guru Puja. So we would have this ceremony for Swamiji, or for the Guru. And Swamiji was talking to everybody, and he was talking, most of the people there spoke Hindi or Gujarati. So he's speaking in that language, and I don't speak that language, so I didn't know what he was talking about. But he kept looking at me, and he kept pointing at me, making points. And at the end of it, and sometimes they were laughing and sometimes they were seriously listening. And at the end of it, he looked at me and at the rest of us who spoke English, and he said, this is what I just said to them. Discipline does not come easily. And here's a woman who has come all the way here from the United States to learn from me, only to have me tell her what I told her the other day. Are you a teacher? What role are you stepping into? Are you not stepping into your potential? And to have her stand there and to say yes. What a humble, humble heart. What a disciplined heart to then turn around, correct herself, and go back and do it properly. And I don't share that with you because I'm like patting myself on my back. I'm sharing that with you because that's the process each and every one of us will go through. We will have moments of poor me, and then we will have moments of clarity. That these are the qualities that we must cultivate in ourselves: the humility to hear the truth, the humility and the courage to self-correct, the confidence to embrace the proper path forward. That these are all parts of the process that we must go through as we move along this path. The path of Ashtanga yoga, the path of spiritual awakening, the path of simply living a better life, a life with less suffering. So hopefully that made some sense. He goes on to talk about a perfected yogi and what a perfected yogi is. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, he says, the individual who keeps the mind steadfast, focused on divinity, and keeps in mind and in heart always an understanding that God is in all things and all beings are God. So it's not just the one that I put up on the pedestal. It's also the lowest one that society has put down. It's not just the human being. It's also the little insect, the little single cell organism. It's the tree, it's the rock, it's all of it. Everything is God, and God is in everything. And the perfected yogi knows this consistently, more and more consistently, as their practice becomes more and more aligned. Initially, it's difficult. It's hard to say, oh, that rodent or, that weed in my garden also has some divine value, not as much as me, because I'm a human being. And, we have that superiority complex initially, but eventually we become humble to it. And we ask ourselves, if I'm going to pull the weed out of my garden, is there a way to do it less harmfully, less hatefully, less thoughtlessly? If I'm going to pull the weed out of the garden, can I do it with love? And can I not, just do it to get rid of this thing? Can I see what I'm doing in a different way and say, well, I'm making room for more vegetables to grow because the vegetables can be eaten by those that are hungry. And then this weed can go back to the ground, can go back to the earth and be reincorporated into the deeper matrix and then come forward again as something else. And that's what the yogi seeks. The yogi seeks to live this life in the best possible way, to bring forward as much nourishment as possible for all the suffering hearts who are hungry for nourishment. And then anything about ourself, our body, physical body, our existence, when the time comes, may we be folded back into the matrix. And when we come forward again, may we come forward again in a similar useful light, or a more useful light. May we be reborn into a place where we are as useful, or hopefully even more useful, toward the end of suffering. Well, so Krishna goes on and on and on in this chapter. He tells him a lot. He says to Arjuna, this is the answer. And Arjuna says, nope, not. Nope. And he says no because he tells Krishna, he says, I have zero ability to control my restless and unsteady mind. This is not going to work for me. And Krishna says, Vairagya, detachment, is also detachment from the mind. Stop thinking that your mind has more power over you. Stop thinking that, because it doesn't. You're giving your power to your mind. You're letting your mind run around like, a wild horse, like a crazy puppy. You're letting it run around. You're letting it do that. Stop letting it do that. Start taking control. Start changing yourself, changing your life. Start practicing diligently with the intention of unity. And keep your mind always focused on divinity. Even in the difficult moments, the moments when you're raging and when you're angry and when you're throwing things, you're like kicking off your shoes in frustration and be like, oh, I'm going to kick off this shoe and I'm going to let that be my offering. And then you're like, well, okay, I'm going to take the shoe off and I'm going to let that be my offering. Well, okay, maybe I'm just going to take my shoe off and place it nicely and let that be my offering. The moment that you embrace the idea that everything you do can be an offering, you will change the attitude with which you do everything. Any questions or reflections?
Can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Any questions or reflections from anyone? I can't. Oh, could you come forward a little bit, or yeah, come forward a little bit and then speak closer, because otherwise it's choppy and I can't hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, I didn't have very much to say, except that it's great to see you.
Oh, it's so good to see you too. Hello. Thank you so much for being there today. It's so wonderful to see you. So wonderful to see you. See you all. Oh my gosh. And
yeah. Oh, it was, yeah. Oh, I'll be on that side next week.
And then we'll all be sitting together again. We'll all be sitting together again in March. Yeah, live together rather than on Zoom. So show of hands, no questions? No? Okay, no reflections? All right, well, I didn't stop halfway through that time. I just went all the way through. So we'll call that a wrap for today. It's a great chapter, you know, it really is. And there's so much in that chapter. So if you have the Bhagavad Gita, go home today and read chapter 6. Absolutely amazing. And while you're at it, read chapters 1 through 18 also, you know. It's an amazing text. And I have to say, there are some books that I've read several times in my life, but the Bhagavad Gita, I have read that so many times, so many different commentaries. I've read it from cover to cover. I've read it chapter. I've read it by verse. You know, I've read it with the intention of going from cover to cover. And I've also read it in a way where I just open up to a page and read that, and then take whatever it is that's in that page that I opened up to. Whatever way you approach it, it's an amazing support in this life for the seeker. It absolutely is. It's relevant to everyone, no matter what their tradition is, no matter what their intended goal is. It's a must read for all of us. Yes, Karen. Hi.
I just wanted to say I read the Bhagavad Gita before I went to YTT and didn't understand one thing I read. And then we went over every chapter while I was here, and I was like, wow. And then to have to go over like another chapter again, like it's starting to sink in, and it's starting. I mean, it's good to keep repeating it and repeating it. I understand it better each time.
Absolutely. And that repetition is necessary, because the first obstacle that we have, and I know it was the first obstacle that I encountered, you know, I wasn't born speaking Sanskrit, and I wasn't born knowing the Hindi names. And the very first time that I picked up a Bhagavad Gita, it was just kind of out of curiosity, you know, and that first few pages is nothing but like 18 syllable long names, you know, so you got to wrap your head around the difficulty of looking at that and saying, I don't even know what that means. You know, are these names, or are they places, or what are they? So the first time through is like looking at the bread maker and being like, where does the yeast go? Where does the flour go? Where does the water go? How long does it stay in there? How does it rise? The second time that you start to read it, you're like, okay, well, I don't know what those words mean. So I'm going to focus more on the words that I know. I have a good idea where to put the yeast now. I have a good idea where to put the flour. You know, I still don't know what I'm going to get, but I'm going to go through it. The third, fourth, fifth time that you work your way through it, there's more and more familiarity. And then eventually something very divine happens. There's this divine intervention where somebody will inevitably start talking to you about the Bhagavad Gita, and they'll say one of those names, and they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, King Dhritarashtra, right? You know, he was blind. And you're like, wait, that word. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is from a bigger story. And then you start piecing it together. And as you're piecing it together, you go back to it again. And then you understand more. And then you go sit in a yoga teacher training, or you take a Bhagavad Gita course, and then you understand more. And then you're 75, 80, 85, 90 years old, reading it for the 150th time. And then you'll understand even a little bit more, you know? It's an ongoing study that reveals itself to you purposefully as it's needed to. It's a great journey. It really is. Yeah. It's not one of those books you should only read once. No. Read it many times. All right, wonderful. Let's sit tall, close the eyes, and draw the hands together in front of the heart. And together we'll lift our voices in one Om. Om. Loka samasta sukino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukino bhavantu. Om shanti shanti shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all so much for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day at the ashram. Enjoy your brunch if you're having some. Show everyone in the kitchen, Linda and everyone, some love and appreciation. Give Casey there some love and appreciation, and everybody else. Give each other some love and appreciation. And I'll see you all soon. Namaste.